What if a medical mistake could bring together two souls who were never supposed to meet? Ollie Sanders, a 7-year-old cleaner, walked into that clinic just for routine tests. Austin Blake, a 6-year-old billionaire, was there as a precaution. Neither of them imagined that within a matter of weeks, their lives would become intertwined in a way that couldn't be undone. An accidental insemination, a baby that was never planned, and a desire that neither of them dared to admit. Because sometimes fate writes stories that reason would never approve of, but the heart can't resist. Monday morning dawned gray in Chicago with that kind of fine drizzle that doesn't really get you wet, but freezes your soul from the inside out. Ollie Sanders adjusted the collar of her navy blue dress, the same one she wore to job interviews, doctor's appointments, and on those rare occasions when she needed to look like more than she really was. The fabric was faded at the seams, but she always ironed it carefully, as if that could somehow erase the years of struggle she carried on her shoulders. At 27, Ollie knew the weight of exhaustion. Not the exhaustion of a bad day, but the kind that builds up in every muscle, in every postponed thought, in every dream tucked away in a drawer. She worked as a cleaner in a commercial building downtown, a place where well-dressed executives walked past her without even noticing she was there. She was invisible, and most days that didn't bother her. But that morning, as she walked through the wet streets, smelling coffee from the bakeries and hearing cars cutting through puddles, Ollie allowed herself to think about something different. She had saved up money, every penny counted, every sacrifice measured, to get tests done at an affordable clinic. Nothing serious, just a precaution. But the truth was, lately she'd been feeling too exhausted, as if her body was asking for a break she couldn't give it. The clinic was in a busy neighborhood with a modest facade and a cramped reception area. Ollie walked in, smelling disinfectant mixed with the cheap perfume of someone who had passed through minutes before. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with glasses hanging from her neck, barely looked up as she wrote down her name. "Have a seat over there. They'll call you soon." Ollie obeyed, clutching her purse in her lap as she watched the other people in the waiting room. A pregnant woman was leafing through a magazine. An elderly man coughed softly, and then the door opened. He walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit that seemed to have been tailored for every inch of his body. His brown hair was slightly messy, as if he'd run his hand through it more than once that morning. But what caught Ollie's attention most were his eyes. Blue, piercing, the kind that seemed to see beyond what you showed. Austin Blake was 36 and had a reputation that preceded him. Billionaire, entrepreneur, a private man who rarely appeared in gossip magazines, but whose name echoed in boardrooms and million-dollar investments. He didn't usually frequent affordable clinics, but that day, following a discreet medical recommendation, he was there to freeze his genetic material, a precaution men in his position took when time and biology started to weigh on the scale. He stopped at reception, exchanged a few words in a low voice with the attendant, and for a brief moment his eyes met Ollie's. It was quick, a second, maybe not even that. But something in the air changed. Ollie looked away immediately, feeling her cheeks warm up for no apparent reason. She didn't know who he was. She had no idea that this man controlled companies, closed multi-million-dollar deals, and had the power to change lives with a signature. To her, he was just another stranger, too handsome to be in that place. Austin, for his part, sat down on the other side of the room, crossed his legs, and picked up his phone, but his eyes returned just once to the young woman in the navy blue dress, who was biting her lower lip while nervously fidgeting with her purse straps. Neither of them knew it, but fate was already writing the script. Meanwhile, in the back of the clinic, an employee named Brenda was dragging her feet down the hallway. She was on the night shift, tired, her eyes burning with sleepiness. She'd worked a double the week before, and now on that rainy morning, all she wanted was to finish up and go home. When she picked up the files and samples to process, she yawned, rubbed her eyes, and without realizing it, mixed up the protocols. One name for another, one procedure for another. It was a simple mistake, mundane, the kind of thing that happens when your body is running on autopilot and your mind has already given up paying attention. But that mistake would change everything. Ollie Sanders, a nurse called out, reading the name on her clipboard. Ollie stood up, smoothed out her dress, and followed the woman down a narrow white hallway lit by fluorescent lights that made everything seem even colder. She entered a small room with an exam table covered in disposable paper and the strong smell of alcohol. "Lie down here, dear. It'll be quick." Ollie obeyed, her heart beating faster than it should. She didn't really understand what was happening. Everything seemed a bit confusing, rushed, but she trusted them. After all, they were professionals. They knew what they were doing. They didn't. On the other side of the clinic, Austin was led to a different room. Everything was explained clearly, efficiently. He signed the papers, did what was necessary, and left 15 minutes later, never imagining that at that exact moment his genetic material was being directed to the wrong place. 3 weeks later, Ollie was at home making tea when the phone rang. "Miss Sanders. This is the clinic calling. We need you to come back as soon as possible. It's urgent." The tone was tense, almost desperate. Ollie felt her stomach turn. What happened? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, with a trembling voice, the attendant said, "You're pregnant." The world stopped. The tea spilled from the cup, staining the tablecloth. Ollie pressed the phone against her ear, unable to breathe properly. "That's not possible. I didn't do anything. And that's why we need to talk in person. Please come in today." When Ollie hung up, her legs could barely hold her up. At the same moment across town, Austin Blake was receiving a similar call. "Mr. Blake, there's been a complication. A serious error. You need to come to the clinic immediately." He frowned, dismissing a meeting with a wave of his hand. "What kind of error?" The voice on the other end hesitated. "You're going to be a father, Mr. Blake." Austin froze. Then his voice came out low, controlled, but loaded with something he couldn't name. "And the mother?" "A complete stranger." The clinic's conference room smelled like stale coffee and poorly disguised desperation. Ollie sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her hands clasped in her lap, trying to process words that seemed to be coming from another language. Pregnant, accidental insemination, medical error, legal proceedings. Each phrase was a bomb exploding inside her chest. On the other side of the long table, 3 clinic representatives took turns between apologies and attempts to explain the inexplicable. There was a lawyer in a gray suit sweating at his temples, a medical director in a white coat with red eyes from someone who hadn't slept in days, and Brenda, the employee who had made the mistake, sitting in the corner, pale as paper, unable to look at Ollie. "Miss Sanders, we understand that this situation is unimaginable," the lawyer began, adjusting his glasses with trembling fingers. "But we need you to understand the severity of what happened. There was a mix-up in protocols. The genetic material that should have been frozen was used in your procedure." Ollie blinked slowly, feeling the room spin. Her voice came out almost inaudible. "I came here for blood tests. Simple tests. How does this turn into an insemination?" The medical director cleared her throat, avoiding direct eye contact. There was confusion with the charts. The room was reserved for another procedure right after your appointment. When the nurse called your name, the instruments and protocols were already prepared for the wrong procedure, and nobody noticed. Ollie's voice went up an octave, loaded with furious disbelief she barely recognized in herself. "Nobody stopped to confirm? To ask? I was lying there trusting you." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Brenda sobbed in the corner, hiding her face in her hands. The lawyer coughed, shuffling through papers as if a magic solution were written there. But there wasn't one. There was no way to undo what had been done. "Who is it?" Ollie suddenly asked, her voice now controlled, cutting. "Whose material is it?" The 3 exchanged glances. It was the director who answered carefully, as if handling broken glass. "From a patient who was also at the clinic the same day. He's already been informed. And he asked to meet you." Ollie's heart raced. "Meet? I don't want to meet anyone. I want this to disappear. I want to wake up and find out it was a nightmare." But it wasn't. The pregnancy test she'd taken 3 times at home confirmed it. The ultrasound they'd asked her to do confirmed it. And now, sitting in that cold room, Ollie had to accept an impossible truth. She was pregnant by a man she'd never met. A man who she would discover minutes later was a billionaire. Meanwhile, across town, Austin Blake was in his office on the top floor of a glass and steel skyscraper. The panoramic view of Chicago stretched out before him. Tall buildings, the river winding between the structures, the sky heavy with clouds. But he wasn't seeing any of it. His eyes were fixed on the phone on his desk as if the device were a lurking enemy. He'd hung up the call from the clinic 5 minutes ago and had remained motionless since then, his breathing controlled, his jaw tense. Marcus, his personal lawyer and longtime friend, sat on the other side of the desk, watching him with concern. "Austin, are you okay?" Austin ran his hand over his face, rubbing his eyes as if he could erase the information he'd just received. "They said there was an error, that my genetic material was used on someone else." Marcus leaned forward, frowning. "Used? What do you mean used?" "A woman was inseminated by mistake. She's pregnant, Marcus. Pregnant with my child." The silence was absolute. Then Marcus let out a short, incredulous laugh. "This is insane. This can't be real. They sent me the documents. It's real." Austin stood up, walking to the window, his fingers drumming on the cold glass as he processed the magnitude of what was happening. He'd always had control over everything in his life. Since he was young, he'd learned to plan every move, every decision. He'd built an empire based on strategy, precision, and zero room for error. And now, suddenly, someone else's mistake had created a life that carried his DNA. A life he hadn't planned for, but that somehow, in a strange and disturbing way, he already felt was his. "Who is she?" Austin asked, still with his back turned. Marcus consulted his notes. "Ollie Sanders, 27 years old, works as a cleaner, no criminal record. According to the preliminary report, she's just as shocked as you are." Austin turned slowly, his dark eyes fixed on Marcus. "I want to meet her." "Austin, wait. We need to think this through carefully. Lawsuits, legal agreements, image protection, I don't care about any of that right now." Austin's voice was firm, almost harsh. "She's carrying my child. I need to see her." Marcus sighed, recognizing that determination. When Austin Blake decided something, there was no argument that would make him change his mind. "All right, I'll arrange a meeting. But let's do this the right way." 2 days later, Ollie was back at the clinic, this time in a private room, more comfortable, with leather sofas and a coffee table where they'd left water and coffee. She didn't touch anything. She just remained seated, back straight, hands clasped together, trying to control the tremor that kept rising up her legs. She didn't know what to expect. She didn't know who this man was, what he wanted, how he would react. All she knew was that in a few minutes, she would look into the eyes of the father of the baby growing inside her. A stranger. A complete stranger. The door opened, and then he walked in. Ollie recognized him immediately. It was the man from the waiting room. The man in the dark suit, piercing blue eyes, and a presence that filled the space effortlessly. Except now, seeing him up close, she noticed more details. The firm line of his jaw, the slight scar above his left eyebrow, the way he moved confident but not arrogant. Austin stopped as soon as he saw her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. They just looked at each other. And somewhere between the silence and the tension that filled the room, something invisible began to form. It wasn't love, not even attraction yet. It was something else, recognition perhaps, as if two puzzle pieces that should never fit together had somehow found their place with each other. Austin was the first to speak, his voice low, controlled, but loaded with something even he couldn't identify. "Ollie Sanders?" She nodded, unable to find words. He took a step forward, extending his hand. "Austin Blake." She hesitated for a second before accepting. When their fingers touched, an electric current ran up Ollie's arm. His hands were warm, firm, and remained around hers a second longer than necessary. When they finally separated, Austin sat on the sofa across from her, leaning slightly forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "I don't know where to start," he admitted. And there was a vulnerability in those words that surprised Ollie. She let out a shaky sigh. "Me neither." And so, amid the chaos and the impossible, two strangers began trying to understand what fate or error had done with their lives. The silence in the room was broken only by the muffled sound of traffic outside and the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Ollie watched Austin with a mixture of caution and curiosity, trying to figure out the man in front of her. He didn't seem like the type of person who lost control. Every movement was calculated, every word carefully chosen. But there was something in his eyes, an intensity, a contained storm that made her nervous and strangely secure at the same time. Austin took a deep breath, running his hand through his hair, in a gesture that seemed more human than everything else about him. "Ollie, I know this situation is impossible to process. Believe me, I'm trying to understand it too." He paused, choosing his words. "But there's a reality here we can't ignore. You're pregnant, and this baby is my child." The way he said "my child" did something strange to Ollie's chest. It wasn't possessive. It was almost reverent, as if those words carried a sacred weight. She crossed her arms in instinctive defense. "And what do you expect me to do with this information?" Austin leaned even further forward, his blue eyes fixed on hers with a sincerity that disarmed her. "Nothing you don't want to do. I didn't come here to control you or dictate what should happen. I came because I can't simply ignore this. I can't pretend there isn't a life being formed. My life, our life." In a way, Ollie felt a lump in her throat. She'd expected arrogance, maybe pressure, perhaps even an offer of money for her to disappear. But not this. Not this raw and unexpected vulnerability. "I don't know what you want from me," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I want to take care of you. Both of you." The words hung in the air like a promise. Ollie blinked, trying to process. "Take care? What do you mean, take care?" Austin stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the city continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the small universe forming in that room. He put his hands in his pockets, the posture of someone about to make a risky move. "Do you live alone?" "Yes, in a small apartment." "Why?" He turned, facing her again. "I want you to move into my house." Ollie's eyes widened, her mouth opening in silent shock. "What?" "During the pregnancy, I want you to have the best medical care, comfort, security. I can offer that. And I want to be present. I want to follow every stage, every appointment, every moment." She let out a short, incredulous laugh, standing up as well. "Are you crazy? I don't know you. You don't know me, and you want me to just move into your house? As if we were, what, a couple?" Austin took a step toward her, and Ollie felt her heart race. He was tall, and his presence filled the space in a way that left her breathless. "Not as a couple. As two people responsible for a life that's coming. Ollie, I'm not asking for anything beyond that. You'd have your own room, your own privacy, but I want to make sure you and the baby are okay, that you don't lack anything." Ollie shook her head, taking a step back. "This is insane. I have my life, my job, a job that leaves you exhausted, an apartment that probably doesn't have decent heating in the winter." He didn't say this condescendingly, but with a direct and honest observation. "I'm not judging. I'm offering an alternative." Ollie bit her lip, feeling tears sting her eyes. She hated the fact that he was right. She hated even more the fact that for a brief moment the offer sounded like relief. "And if I say no?" Austin sighed, his expression softening. "Then I'll respect that. But I'll still want to be present. I'll still make sure you have what you need, even from a distance." There was something in his voice, in the way he looked at her, that made Ollie realize he was serious. It wasn't a power play. It wasn't control. It was something she didn't expect to find, genuine care. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The smell of coffee on the coffee table, the sound of rain beginning to fall outside, the weight of the decision she was about to make, everything mixed into a chaotic symphony of emotions. "I need conditions," she finally said, opening her eyes and facing him with a new firmness. Austin raised an eyebrow, a slight smile touching his lips. "I'm listening. First, respect. I'm not your employee or your property. I'm a person, and I want to be treated as such." "Agreed." "Second, freedom. I won't be a prisoner. If I want to go out, visit friends, have my own life, you won't stop me." "Agreed." "Third, a clear legal contract. I want everything documented, rights, responsibilities, what happens after the baby is born. Everything." Austin nodded slowly, respectfully. "My lawyer will prepare everything, and you can have your own lawyer reviewing every line." Ollie swallowed hard. Her hands trembled slightly, But she didn't look away. And fourth, I want you to understand something. I'm not doing this because I need you. I'm doing it because maybe it's best for the baby. But that doesn't mean I trust you. Not yet. For the first time since entering the room, Austin smiled for real. It wasn't arrogant or calculated. It was genuine, almost relieved. I didn't expect you to trust me. Trust is something you build. And I intend to build it. He extended his hand again, this time not as a formal greeting, but as an agreement, a pact between two strangers who were about to embark on an impossible journey. Ollie looked at the extended hand, firm, secure, and there was something in his gaze, firm but gentle, determined but respectful, that made her take the most frightening step of her life. She took his hand. The grip was formal, professional. But their fingers stayed connected a second longer than necessary, and when they finally separated, both felt the ghost of the touch remain. Austin cleared his throat, taking a step back. I'll arrange everything. The move, the contract, the doctors. You can bring whatever you want from your house, whatever you need. Ollie nodded, still processing what she had just agreed to. Whenever you're ready. But the sooner the better, so we can start proper prenatal care. She let out a shaky sigh, running her hand through her hair. Is this real? Is this really happening? Austin took a step toward her, and for a moment Ollie thought he was going to touch her again. But he just stopped close enough for her to feel the warmth emanating from him, the subtle scent of expensive cologne and wood. It's happening, Ollie, and I promise I'll do everything in my power to make sure you don't regret this decision. She looked up, meeting those blue eyes that seemed to hold secrets she didn't yet know. And somewhere deep in her chest, a small spark of something, hope perhaps, or just curiosity, began to shine. Okay, she whispered. Let's try. Austin nodded. And for the first time since discovering the pregnancy, he felt something beyond shock. He felt purpose. And though neither of them knew it yet, that handshake that lasted a second longer than it should have was the first step toward something much bigger than either of them could imagine. The move happened on a cloudy Thursday. Ollie watched through the window of Austin's car as Chicago transformed around her. The busy downtown gave way to residential neighborhoods, then tree-lined avenues, until they finally arrived at a tall wrought-iron gate that opened automatically, revealing a private drive. The mansion appeared like something out of an architecture magazine. Modern lines, glass and concrete, blended with touches of dark wood, enormous windows that seemed to embrace natural light, meticulously maintained gardens with stone fountains and sculpted hedges. It was all so different from her small apartment with a leaky ceiling that Ollie felt her stomach tighten. We're here, Austin said softly, parking near the main entrance. Ollie got out of the car, feeling the cool afternoon breeze touch her face. The air here smelled different, cleaner, with a hint of flowers and freshly cut grass. So different from the smell of exhaust and street food that permeated her old neighborhood. A middle-aged man, dressed discreetly, appeared at the door. Miss Sanders? Welcome. I'm Thomas, the butler. If you need anything, I'm at your service. Butler? Of course there was a butler. Ollie just nodded, not knowing exactly what to say. Austin placed his hand lightly on the small of her back, a touch so brief she almost thought she'd imagined it, guiding her inside. The interior was even more impressive. Very high ceilings, a wide marble staircase, artwork on the walls that Ollie was certain cost more than she'd earn in several lifetimes. Everything was impeccable, elegant, intimidating. Your room is on the second floor, Austin explained, climbing the stairs beside her. It's the most spacious suite. I thought you'd like the view. He opened a double door of light wood, and Ollie felt the air escape her lungs. The suite was bigger than her entire old apartment. A king-size bed with immaculate white sheets dominated the center, a sitting area with sofa and armchair, a desk by the window, doors leading to a walk-in closet, and a bathroom that looked like a private spa. And the view, floor-to-ceiling windows, showed the garden, a pool in the back, and beyond it, the distant silhouette of the city. This is too much, Ollie murmured, almost to herself. Austin was leaning against the doorframe, watching her explore the space. There was something in his expression, satisfaction perhaps, seeing her react. You can change whatever you want. Bring your things. Decorate however you prefer. This is your home now, Ollie, for as long as you need. She turned to face him, and for a moment their eyes met. There were so many unspoken things hovering between them. Gratitude, distrust, curiosity, fear. But neither knew how to turn feelings into words, so they just stayed there, connected by a look that lasted seconds longer than it should have. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. Austin just nodded, pushing off from the door. "I'll let you get settled. Dinner is at 8. If you want, we can eat together." It wasn't an order. It was an invitation, and Ollie noticed the difference. "Okay." When he left, closing the door softly behind him, Ollie finally allowed her shoulders to relax. She walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cold glass, and tried to understand how her life had changed so drastically in so little time. The first few days were like living in a bubble of polite silence. They crossed paths at breakfast, Austin already dressed for work, Ollie still in pajamas, hair pulled into a messy bun. He read the newspaper. She drank tea. They exchanged cordial good mornings, nothing more. During the day, Austin disappeared to the office. Ollie explored the house cautiously, like a guest afraid of breaking something precious. She discovered a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves smelling of leather and aged paper. She found a private movie theater, a gym, even a music studio with a grand piano she didn't dare touch. In the evenings, they dined together in the formal dining room, a long dark wood table where they sat at opposite ends, separated by meters of distance and a rigid politeness that prevented any intimacy. The conversations were superficial. Safe. How was your day? Quiet. And yours? Productive. Silence. The sound of silverware against porcelain. More silence. But there was something in the pauses. Something in the way Austin looked at her when he thought she wasn't noticing. Something in the way Ollie found excuses to walk by the room where he worked just to see if he was okay. They lived like civilized strangers, but the looks lasted longer than they should. It was on a Friday night that the first crack in the wall of formality appeared. Ollie was in the library, wrapped in a blanket on the sofa, reading a novel she'd picked from the shelf. The firelight danced on the walls, creating soft shadows. She was so absorbed in the story that she didn't hear Austin enter. "Good book?" She jumped, putting her hand to her chest. "You scared me. Sorry." He smiled a small smile, but genuine, and walked to the fireplace, resting his arm on the mantel above. He'd removed his jacket and loosened his tie. The sleeves of his white shirt were rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms with slightly defined veins. Ollie looked away quickly, feeling her cheeks warm. "Yes, good book," she replied, showing the cover. "I hope you don't mind that I took it from your library." "Of course not. Everything here is yours too." He paused. "Do you like to read?" "I love it. It's always been my way of escaping, you know." Austin nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel exposed and seen at the same time. "I understand perfectly." There was a moment of comfortable silence. Then Austin moved, sitting on the other end of the sofa, not too close, but closer than they'd been since she'd moved in. "Ollie, can I ask you something?" She closed the book, placing it in her lap. "Sure. Are you comfortable here? I know it's a huge change, and I want to make sure you're not feeling like a prisoner." The genuine concern in his voice touched her. "I'm not a prisoner. You've been very respectful. It's just that—" She hesitated, looking for the right words. "It's very different from what I'm used to. All of this," she gestured vaguely around, "seems like another world. It's a world that can be yours too, but it's not really mine, is it? This is your life, Austin. I'm just here because of the baby." He leaned slightly forward, his blue eyes fixed on hers. "Maybe it started that way, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way." Ollie's heart raced. What was he saying? Before she could respond, Austin stood up, running his hand through his hair in that gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "It's late. I should let you rest." He started to leave, but when he reached the door, he stopped, turning to look at her once more. "Ollie?" "Yes? I'm glad you're here. Privier. And then he left, leaving her alone with her heart beating erratically and a question burning in her mind. What exactly was happening between them? The following days brought small changes, subtle, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. At breakfast, Austin started asking questions about the book she was reading. She started asking about his work. The conversation stretched from minutes to almost half an hour. During dinner, the distance between them at the table decreased. First, Austin moved a few chairs closer. Then Ollie did the same, until within a week they were sitting side by side, sharing the non-alcoholic wine he bought especially for her. And there were the accidental touches. A hand that brushed against another when reaching for the salt. Knees that touched under the table. The moment when Austin passed by her in the narrow kitchen hallway, his hand briefly finding her waist so they wouldn't bump into each other. The heat of his palm burning through the thin fabric of her blouse. Each touch was an electric shock, brief, innocent, but charged with something neither of them knew how to name. It was on a particularly cold night that everything changed more significantly. Ollie was on the back porch wrapped in a shawl, watching the illuminated city in the distance. The wind tousled her hair, and she closed her eyes, allowing herself just to feel. She didn't hear Austin approach. She only noticed his presence when she felt his warmth behind her, close but not touching. "It's cold out here," he said softly. "I know, but it's beautiful." They stood like that for a moment, side by side, watching the city lights flicker like fallen stars. Then, with a gentleness that surprised her, Austin raised his hand and slowly tucked a strand of hair that the wind had mussed behind her ear. His fingers brushed her skin, warm, firm, gentle. Ollie turned her face, and suddenly they were so close she could see the tiny golden flecks in his blue eyes. She could feel his breath mixing with hers. She could hear a heartbeat. She didn't know if it was hers or his. The air between them seemed to run out. Neither of them moved. Neither of them pulled back. They just stayed there, suspended in a moment that seemed to last an eternity and a second at the same time. It was Austin who broke the silence, his voice hoarse, low. "Ollie." But he didn't finish the sentence because there were no words for what was happening between them. So he just stepped back, taking a step away, breaking the spell. "You should go inside. It's too cold." She nodded, unable to speak, and walked back inside the house, still feeling the ghost of his touch on her face. And that night, lying in her huge bed, Ollie realized something that scared and thrilled her at the same time. She was starting to feel something for Austin Blake, something dangerous, something inevitable. The morning started differently. Ollie came down for breakfast and found Austin already at the table. But this time, he wasn't alone. There was an elegant woman beside him, hair pulled into an impeccable bun, a perfectly tailored gray suit, and a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ollie, good morning." Austin stood up, a gesture of chivalry she still wasn't used to. "This is Victoria Hartley. She's an image and etiquette consultant." Ollie stopped mid-step, a cup of tea forgotten in her hand. "Consultant for what?" Victoria stood up too, extending her hand with a warmer smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ollie. I know this might seem strange, but I'm here to help you if you want." "Help with what exactly?" Austin approached, hands in his pockets, his posture slightly tense, as if he were about to propose something that could be rejected. "Ollie, you're going to be by my side at some social events over the next few months, business dinners, maybe some parties. And I thought," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, "I thought maybe you'd like to feel more prepared, more confident." Ollie felt a wave of heat rise up her neck, anger, shame. She wasn't sure. "You think I need to be fixed?" "No." Austin took a step forward, his expression alarmed. "That's not it, Ollie. You're perfect the way you are. But I know how intimidating these environments can be, people who judge, who ask invasive questions. I just want you to have the tools to defend yourself, to feel powerful." Victoria intervened gently. "Ollie, can I be honest? I'm not here to change you. I'm here to amplify what you already have. You have natural beauty, a quiet strength. I just want to help you recognize that and project it." Ollie looked between the two of them. There was sincerity in Austin's eyes, genuine concern. And Victoria, well, she didn't seem like the type of person who would waste time with falsehoods. "And if I say no?" Austin shrugged, a small smile touching his lips. "Then you say no. Nothing changes. You continue being exactly who you are." Ollie took a deep breath. Part of her wanted to reject the idea out of pride, but another part, the part that had always felt invisible, always diminished, was curious. "Okay," she finally said. Let's try. The following days were a revelation. Victoria didn't arrive with a list of rigid rules or try to transform her into something she wasn't. Instead, she started with questions. What makes you feel beautiful? When do you feel most like yourself? What version of Ollie would you like to show the world? They spent entire mornings talking about posture, not in a robotic way but naturally. How to enter a room and take up space without apologizing. How to make eye contact without looking away. How to speak clearly, without diminishing your words with sorry, or maybe. There were social etiquette lessons, not to turn her into a porcelain doll, but so she'd know how to navigate difficult conversations, respond to invasive questions with elegance, and maintain her dignity even when people tried to make her feel inferior. When someone asks an indiscreet question about your pregnancy or your relationship with Austin, Victoria instructed, you smile, maintain eye contact, and say, what an interesting question, but I prefer to keep some matters private. Simple, firm, polite. Ollie practiced in front of the mirror, watching how her posture changed, how her voice gained firmness. There were also basic French lessons, useful phrases for formal dinners, for greeting people, for showing she was more than she appeared. And then came the visual transformation. Victoria brought in a stylist named Margot, a vibrant woman with red hair and bright green eyes, who looked at Ollie as if she was seeing an unfinished masterpiece. Darling, you have beautiful bone structure, and those eyes deep, expressive. Let's enhance what you already have. Ollie's closet, previously almost empty, began to fill up. Dresses in soft tones, blues, greens, grays that hugged her body without squeezing, respecting the belly that was starting to grow, expensive fabrics that fell like water, comfortable but elegant shoes, discreet accessories, a delicate necklace, simple earrings. Margot taught her how to dress strategically. You don't need to show everything to be noticed. The power is in suggestion, in confidence. A well-cut dress says more than 1,000 words. When Ollie looked at herself in the mirror after the first complete transformation, she barely recognized the woman reflected back. The navy blue dress hugged her curves gently, highlighting her belly elegantly. Her hair, previously always tied up carelessly, now fell in soft waves over her shoulders. The makeup was light, just enough to enhance her eyes and give color to her lips. But it wasn't the clothes or makeup that drew the most attention. It was the posture, shoulders back, chin up, direct gaze without fear. My God, she whispered. Victoria smiled beside her. Do you see now? This was always in you. You just needed to be reminded. Austin was in his office when Ollie came down for dinner that evening. He was on the phone talking about some business or other, but when he saw her standing in the doorway, his voice failed. I'll call back. He hung up without waiting for a response, his eyes fixed on her. Ollie felt her heart race under that gaze. There was something different in the way he observed her now. Admiration, contained desire, respect. You look beautiful, he finally said, his voice low. Thank you, she smiled, a new confidence shining in her eyes. Victoria's good at what she does. Austin approached slowly, hands still in his pockets, as if he needed to control the urge to touch her. It's not Victoria. It's you. It's always been you. The air between them became dense again, charged with that electricity that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Ollie took a step toward him, and for the first time since she'd moved in, she was the one who initiated the proximity. Austin. Yes? Thank you for all of this, for helping me see myself differently. He shook his head slowly, his blue eyes piercing. I didn't do anything. I just gave you the space to flourish. You did all the work. They stood there just inches from each other, and Ollie realized it was getting harder and harder to remember why she should keep her distance. The following weeks brought an even deeper transformation. Ollie started reading the financial newspapers Austin left on the table. She asked questions about his business, and he, surprised and delighted, answered patiently, explaining complex concepts in simple ways, never making her feel inferior for not knowing. She began accompanying him to some smaller engagements, a business lunch, a presentation at his company, and each time she felt more comfortable, more present. People noticed, secretaries, partners, even strangers. Everyone noticed the elegant woman beside Austen Blake, the way she conversed intelligently, how she smiled with confidence, how she took up space without apologizing. But what changed most was the dynamic between them. Dinners were now long, deep conversations, genuine laughter, shared stories. Austen talked about his privileged but also lonely childhood. Ollie spoke about her struggles, but also about her dreams. And the touches increased. They were no longer accidental. During dinner, their knees touched lightly under the table. Neither pulled back. Austen continued cutting his steak, but his leg remained pressed against hers. Ollie held her glass of non-alcoholic wine tighter than necessary, but didn't move. They just looked at each other intensely as the electric current between them grew. "You're adapting well," Austen said, his voice low. "You made it easy. I only gave you the tools. You had the courage to use them." His hand moved slowly, intentionally, until it found hers on the table. Their fingers intertwined, warm, firm, connected. Ollie felt her heart beat so hard she was sure he could hear it. Ollie, he hesitated, gently squeezing her hand. "I'm proud of you, of what you've become. I'm still the same person." "No." He shook his head, his eyes fixed on hers. "You're more stronger, more confident, more everything." And there, under the soft light of the dining room, with their hands intertwined and their hearts beating out of sync, both realized that something had changed irrevocably between them. They were no longer strangers. They were no longer just two people sharing a space out of obligation. They were becoming something more, something dangerous, something inevitable. And neither of them knew if they were ready to face what would come next. The phone call came on a rainy Tuesday while Austen was at the office, and Ollie was leafing through a cookbook in the kitchen, thinking about trying something new. The sound of his cell phone echoed through the house, and Thomas the butler appeared in the doorway with a slightly worried expression. "Miss Sanders, Mr. Blake would like to speak with you. He says it's urgent." Ollie felt her stomach tighten. Urgent was never a good word. She took the phone from Thomas's hand, bringing it to her ear. "Austen, what happened?" His voice was controlled, but she'd already learned to perceive the nuances of tension hidden behind the apparent calm. "Ollie, my parents announced a visit. They arrive Friday, and they're staying for a week." She blinked, confused. "Okay, and what's the problem?" There was a pause. Then Austen sighed, a heavy sound loaded with unspoken complications. "They don't know about the real situation, about how you got pregnant, about the medical error. I didn't tell them because my mother has heart problems and I didn't want to stress her with a potential scandal." Ollie leaned against the counter, processing. "So, what did you tell them?" "That I'm in a relationship, that my girlfriend is pregnant and living with me." Ollie's heart raced. "Your girlfriend. I know. It was the simplest way to explain without getting into complicated details. But now they want to meet her. Meet you." Ollie ran her hand through her hair, feeling the weight of the situation fall on her shoulders. "Austen, this is a lie. I'm not your girlfriend. We barely know each other. I know, and you have every right to say no. But Ollie," his voice became softer, almost vulnerable, "I'm asking, as a favor, just for 1 week. Then they'll leave and we go back to our normal life." Ollie closed her eyes. Part of her wanted to refuse, to keep the lines well defined between what was real and what was pretend. But another part, the part that had started to feel something genuine for him, hesitated. "And what exactly are you asking me to do?" "Pretend. Just for a week. Act like a couple. Share the same room." The silence that followed was heavy. "Share the same room?" Ollie repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Just to keep up appearances. I'll sleep on the sofa or on the floor. You get the bed. I promise, Ollie, nothing will happen. We just need to look convincing." She bit her lip, her heart beating erratically. The idea of sharing a room with Austen, of having him so close, so present, was frightening and strangely exciting. "Okay," she finally said. "I'll do it. But you owe me an honest explanation after they leave." "Deal." Friday came too quickly. Ollie spent the entire morning nervous, changing clothes 3 times before deciding on a moss-green dress that Margot had chosen elegant but casual. Her hair was loose in natural waves, the makeup light. She looked at herself in the mirror and took a deep breath. You can do this. It's just 1 week. When she heard the sound of the car in the driveway, her stomach knotted. Austin appeared in the bedroom doorway wearing dress pants and a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves. He stopped when he saw her, his eyes traveling over her figure with an admiration he didn't try to hide. You look perfect. I'm dying of nervousness. He approached, taking her hand, a gesture that was becoming increasingly natural between them. They're going to love you. How could they not? His fingers squeezed hers, and for a moment, Ollie forgot this was just pretend. Margaret and Richard Blake were exactly what Ollie expected. Elegant, sophisticated, but with a surprising warmth in their eyes. Margaret, a woman with perfectly styled gray hair and a gentle smile, hugged Ollie as soon as she saw her. So, you're the young woman who captured my son's heart. What a pleasure to meet you. Richard, tall and imposing like Austin, but with age lines marking his face, shook her hand firmly. It's good to see Austin finally happy. He needed someone like you. Ollie forced a smile, feeling Austin's hand land on the small of her back, a touch of support, but also part of the performance. During dinner, the questions came. How they met, how long they'd been together, how the pregnancy happened. Austin responded with a rehearsed story that mixed truths and lies. They met through mutual friends, connected immediately, and the pregnancy was a surprise, but a welcome one. Ollie contributed where she could, adding small details that made the story more believable. And surprisingly, it was easier than she'd imagined. Maybe because part of the story, the connection, the mutual respect, the growing admiration wasn't a lie. When it was time for bed, Ollie went up to Austin's room with her heart in her throat. His room was different from hers, darker, more masculine, dark wood, shades of gray and navy blue, a king-size bed with impeccable sheets. It smelled like him, that mixture of expensive cologne and something inherently Austin. He came in behind her, closing the door. You can have the bed. I'll sleep on the sofa over there. Ollie looked at the sofa in the corner, comfortable, but definitely not made for someone Austin's height. You won't fit there. I'll manage. Austin, be reasonable. The bed is huge. We can share. Just sleep. Nothing more. He hesitated, his eyes searching hers. Are you sure? No, she admitted, but I am anyway. That first night was torture. They lay with their backs turned, each on one end of the huge bed. But the awareness of each other's presence was overwhelming. Ollie heard his breathing, deep, controlled. She felt the warmth emanating from his body, even with the distance between them. His scent was everywhere, on the pillows, on the sheets, in the air. Ollie. His voice cut through the silence, low and hoarse. Yes? Thank you for doing this. You're welcome. Silence again. Then, almost imperceptibly, their breathing synchronized, inhaling and exhaling at the same rhythm, as if their bodies were conversing in a language their minds didn't yet understand. When Austin whispered, "Good night," Ollie responded with a soft, almost inaudible sigh. Neither of them slept easily that night. The following days were a delicate dance of pretend intimacy that was beginning to feel more and more real. In front of Austin's parents, they were the perfect couple. He placed his hand on her waist as they passed through a doorway. She adjusted his tie before they left for dinner. They exchanged knowing looks, small smiles, casual touches that made Margaret sigh with satisfaction. You two are so beautiful together, she said one afternoon while they were having tea in the garden. I see the way he looks at you, Ollie. My son is in love. Ollie almost choked on her tea. Austin, sitting beside her, just smiled, putting his arm around her shoulders in a gesture that seemed too natural to be just acting. How could I not be? He said, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. At night, they shared the bed, and each day the distance between them decreased. On the second night, they woke up facing each other. On the third, his hand was dangerously close to hers. On the fourth, their feet touched under the sheets, and neither pulled back. On the fifth night, Austin broke the silence. Ollie, can I ask you an honest question? She turned to face him in the dim light, their faces illuminated only by the moonlight coming through the window. Sure. Is this being as difficult for you as it is for me? Her heart accelerated. What do you mean? He sighed, running his hand over his face. Pretending. Being so close to you and having to constantly remind myself it's just an act. Touching you and knowing I have to stop. Looking at you and not being able to. He stopped, biting his lip. Ollie felt the air leave her lungs. Not being able to what? Austin turned completely toward her. Their bodies now just inches apart. She could feel his warmth, the tension radiating from every muscle. Not being able to do this. And then, slowly, giving her all the time to pull back, he reached out and touched her face. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, moving up to brush away a strand of hair. Ollie closed her eyes, leaning into the touch. Her heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Austin, tell me to stop. Please, Ollie, if you don't want this, tell me to stop. But she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she opened her eyes and met his blue, intense, full of contained desire and something deeper that neither was ready to name. I don't want you to stop. And in that moment, the line between pretend and reality disappeared completely. The next morning arrived with a golden light that flooded the room through the half-open curtains. Ollie woke slowly, feeling a comforting warmth around her. It took a few seconds to realize she was nestled against Austin's chest, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. She froze, her heart racing. The previous night had ended with that touch on her face, that whispered confession, but nothing beyond that had happened. They had simply stayed there, looking at each other in the dim light until exhaustion won, and without realizing it, their bodies found each other in the middle of the bed. Austin moved slightly, pulling her closer against him, still asleep. Ollie closed her eyes, allowing herself just to feel his scent, that mixture of woody cologne and something purely masculine, the warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of his shirt, the sound of his deep, peaceful breathing. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Are you awake? His hoarse voice vibrated against the top of her head. Yes, she whispered. He didn't pull away. His fingers resting on her waist began to trace lazy, almost unconscious circles. I slept better than I have in years. Ollie smiled against his chest. Me too. They stayed like that for a few more minutes, suspended in a bubble of intimacy neither wanted to break. But then voices downstairs brought them back to reality. Austin's parents were already awake. We should go down, Ollie murmured, but didn't move. We should, Austin agreed, also not moving. It was she who finally pulled away, feeling the immediate loss of his warmth. When their eyes met, there was a silent question hovering between them. What does all this mean? But neither had the courage to put it into words. Breakfast was lively. Margaret was radiant, talking about plans for the day, a visit to a museum, maybe lunch at a charming restaurant downtown. Richard read the newspaper, occasionally commenting on politics or business. Ollie sat beside Austin, and though they were maintaining the couple facade, there was something different now. The touches were softer, more natural. When he passed her the butter, his fingers lingered. When she laughed at one of Richard's jokes, Austin's hand found her knee under the table, squeezing lightly. Margaret noticed. She always noticed everything. You two are so connected, she said with a warm smile. It's rare to see this kind of genuine chemistry. Ollie felt her cheeks warm, but Austin just smiled, looking at her with an intensity that made her momentarily forget they were pretending. That's because she's special, he said simply. And the way he said it with absolute conviction, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world, made Ollie's heart tighten. The day passed in a blur of activities. They visited the museum, where Austin explained the artwork to Ollie with an enthusiasm she didn't expect. They had lunch at an Italian restaurant where Margaret insisted on ordering for everyone to try everything. Richard told embarrassing stories from Austin's childhood, making him roll his eyes affectionately. And through it all, Ollie realized something that surprised her. She liked the Blake family. She liked the way Margaret affectionately touched Richard's arm when he spoke. She liked how Richard looked at his son with barely disguised pride. She liked being part of that world, even if temporarily. But it was at night, when they returned home and Austin's parents retired to the guest room, that the real transformation happened. Austin and Ollie were in the library. She was on the sofa with a book she wasn't even trying to read, and he was standing by the window watching the rain begin to fall outside. Your parents are amazing, Ollie said, breaking the silence. Austin turned, hands in his pockets. They really liked you. My mother told me you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Ollie laughed softly. If she knew the truth. The truth? Austin approached, sitting beside her on the sofa. Which part of the truth, Ollie? That we started in an unconventional way? That we had to pretend for my parents? Or the truth that at some point over these weeks I stopped pretending? Her heart stopped. Austin. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. "Ollie, I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was that first day at the clinic when our eyes met for a second. Maybe it was when you laid out your conditions so firmly. Or maybe it was in all the little things, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, how you smile when you read something funny, how you gently place your hand on your belly when you think no one's looking." Tears began to form in Ollie's eyes. "You can't say these things. We had an agreement." "What agreement?" He leaned closer, his voice low and intense. "The agreement was that you'd live here during the pregnancy, that I'd take care of you. But there was nothing in the agreement about not falling in love." The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. Ollie felt tears stream down, but didn't look away. "I don't know what to do with this," she confessed, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to trust this. What if you wake up one day and realize it was just the situation? The proximity. What if—" Austin brought his hand to her face, wiping away the tears with his thumb. "What if I tell you I think about you all the time? That I leave the office early just to have dinner with you? That I wake up in the middle of the night and have to control myself not to pull you close to me?" Ollie closed her eyes, leaning into his hand. "This scares me, Austin. All of this scares me." "I know. It scares me too." He pressed his forehead against hers. "But the only thing that scares me more is the idea of pretending I don't feel this." They stayed like that, breaths mixing, hearts beating in chaotic synchrony. And then Margaret appeared in the doorway, stopping abruptly when she saw them. "Oh, sorry. I just came to get a book." She quickly grabbed a random volume from the shelf, but before leaving, she looked at Ollie with an expression that said more than words could express. It was approval, affection, and something that looked very much like, "Welcome to the family." When Margaret left, Ollie let out a shaky sigh. She knows. Knows what? That this is real. That we're not pretending anymore. Austin smiled, that rare, genuine smile that completely transformed his face. "Then maybe we should stop fighting it." That night when they lay down, there were no more excuses about sharing the bed out of necessity. There was no more pretense of keeping distance. Austin opened his arms, and Ollie nestled against him naturally, as if she'd always belonged there. His hand found her belly, resting gently on the small curve where the baby was growing. "Hi there, little one," he whispered, and Ollie felt her heart break and mend at the same time. "You're going to be an amazing father," she said softly. "And you're already an amazing mother." She turned her face to look at him, their faces so close she could count every eyelash, see every nuance of blue in his eyes. "Austin, I need to tell you something." "What?" She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I stopped pretending too, a long time ago." His eyes softened, and he brought his hand to her face again, as if he couldn't stop touching her. "So, what do we do now?" I think we just move forward. See where this takes us. No more pretending. No more pretending." He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, then another on the tip of her nose, and finally, hesitating just enough to give her a chance to pull back, his lips brushed against hers. It was tender, questioning, full of unspoken promises. When they separated, both were smiling. "Good night, Ollie," he whispered. "Good night, Austin." And for the first time since it all began, they truly slept together, not as strangers sharing a space, not as actors in a performance, but as two people who were discovering little by little that maybe the mistake that brought them together wasn't a mistake after all. Maybe it was destiny disguised as an accident. And maybe, just maybe, the love they were feeling didn't need an explanation. It just needed to be lived. Austin's parents left on a sunny Sunday morning, taking with them the need for pretense, but leaving behind something much more real and frightening, the naked truth that Austin and Ollie had fallen in love. That afternoon the house seemed strangely quiet. Ollie was on the back porch, wrapped in a light shawl, watching the leaves dance in the wind. Her belly was more noticeable now, a gentle curve she unconsciously caressed whenever she was thoughtful. Austin watched her from the library doorway without her noticing. There was something mesmerizing about the way she moved, so natural, so genuine. During the week with his parents, he'd been surprised by how easily she'd fit into his life, as if she'd always belonged there. But now, without the protection of pretense, the real vulnerability of what they felt hovered between them like an unanswered question. He approached silently, stopping beside her. "What are you thinking about?" Ollie smiled, without taking her eyes off the garden. "About how everything changed. A few months ago, I was cleaning offices, worried about bills. And now," she looked down at her belly, "now I'm here, pregnant, living in a mansion, feeling things I don't know if I should feel." Austin turned to face her completely, hands in his pockets, trying to control the urge to touch her. "And what are you feeling?" She finally looked at him, and there was raw honesty in her eyes. Fear, hope, confusion, and something else that I can't name yet. He took a step closer, eliminating the distance between them. "Can I try to name it for you?" Her heart raced. "You can." "Desire," he began, his voice low and hoarse. "Need. The feeling that somehow, inexplicably, you've become essential to me. The way I wake up thinking about you. How I count the hours until I can see you again. How every touch, every look, leaves me wanting more." Ollie felt the air leave her lungs. The intensity in his gaze was overwhelming. "Austin, tell me it's not just me. Tell me you feel this too." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly. "It's not just you. I feel it. God, I feel it so much it scares me." Something changed in his expression, a decision made, a line crossed. "We don't have to be afraid, Ollie." And then, with a gentleness that contrasted with the evident urgency in his eyes, he raised his hand and touched her face. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, his thumb caressing her lower lip. Ollie closed her eyes, leaning into the touch. Every nerve ending in her body was on fire. "Look at me," he asked softly. She obeyed, opening her eyes and meeting that intense blue she now knew so well. "I want to kiss you. For real. Not like we did in front of my parents, but for real. May I?" Her voice came out as a trembling whisper. "Yes." Austin leaned in slowly, giving her all the time in the world to change her mind, but she didn't. Instead, her eyes closed the moment his lips touched hers. The kiss started soft, a careful exploration, a question asked with the mouth. But when Ollie sighed against him, something broke. Her hands moved up to his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. And Austin pulled her closer, one hand on her waist, the other still caressing her face. The kiss deepened, tongues met, tastes mingled. It was hunger and tenderness at the same time, desire and care, urgency and patience. When they finally separated, both were breathless, foreheads resting against each other. "Wow," Ollie whispered. Austin laughed softly, a hoarse sound full of satisfaction. "Yeah, wow." They stayed like that for a moment, just breathing, getting used to this new reality. Then Austin took her hand. "Come with me." He guided her into the house, climbing the stairs to his room, the room that was now theirs. When they entered, Austin closed the door gently, turning to face her. The afternoon light came through the windows, bathing the room in golden tones. Ollie stood in the middle of the room, the shawl fallen from her shoulders, the simple dress gently hugging her curves. She'd never looked more beautiful. "Are you sure?" he asked, giving her one last chance to pull back. Ollie didn't hesitate. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Those words were all he needed to hear. Austin approached slowly, each step deliberate, like a predator who doesn't want to scare his prey. But there was nothing predatory in his eyes, only pure adoration. He stopped in front of her, his hands rising to hold her face with both palms. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice deep and loaded with emotion. "You make me nervous," she confessed, her eyes on his lips. "Good nervous or bad nervous? The best kind of nervous." He smiled before kissing her again, this time with more urgency. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt, unbuttoning them one by one with trembling fingers. He didn't rush her, just watched her work, his eyes dark with desire. When the shirt finally fell to the floor, Ollie placed her hands on his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin, the accelerated rhythm of his heart. She traced the lines of his muscles, marveling at his solidity, at the physical proof that this was real. Austin moaned softly at her touch, his hands finding the zipper of her dress. He opened it slowly, his fingers brushing the exposed skin, sending shivers down her entire spine. The dress fell in a whisper of fabric, and suddenly Ollie was just in her lingerie, vulnerable and exposed. She braced herself for some comment, some judgment, but when she looked at Austin, all she saw was reverence. "Beautiful," he repeated, his hands traveling down her arms, her shoulders, down the side of her body, with a gentleness that made her tremble. "Perfect." He guided her to the bed, laying her carefully on the sheets. Then he positioned himself beside her, propped on one elbow, just watching her. "What?" Ollie asked, blushing. "I'm just trying to memorize this moment. You here with me. I want to remember this forever." Tears stung her eyes, but they were tears of happiness, of overwhelming emotion. "Kiss me again, Austin." And he obeyed. This time the kiss was pure fire. Hands explored, discovering every curve, every sensitive spot. Austin traced a path of kisses down her neck, descending along her collarbone, stopping reverently over the belly where the baby was growing. "Hi there, little one," he whispered against her skin, pressing a tender kiss there. "Daddy's here." Ollie felt her heart melt completely. She ran her fingers through his hair, pulling him back up. "I need you," she whispered. He positioned himself over her, careful with her belly, his eyes fixed on hers. "Look at me. Don't look away." And she didn't. When their bodies finally joined, it was as if all the pieces of an impossible puzzle fit together perfectly. They moved together slowly at first, then with more intensity, but always connected. Eyes on eyes, hands intertwined, breaths synchronized. Austin whispered sweet words in her ear, how beautiful she was, how much he desired her, how he couldn't believe she was real. Ollie responded with muffled moans, with trembling whispers of his name, with touches that said everything words couldn't express. The tension built, building to a breaking point, and when they finally arrived together, it was with each other's names on their lips, eyes still connected, hearts beating as one. Afterward, lying among rumpled sheets, bodies intertwined, and sweat cooling on their skin, they remained silent for a long time. Austin caressed the curve of her belly, tracing lazy circles with his fingers. Ollie rested her face on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "Austin," she said softly. That was... I know." She smiled against his skin. "How can you know what I was going to say?" He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Because I'm feeling it too. Whatever you were about to say, I'm feeling it too." Ollie raised her face to look at him, and there was a new vulnerability in her eyes. "I think I'm falling in love with you. Actually, no. I think I've already fallen." The smile that spread across Austin's face was one of pure happiness. "Thank God, because I've been there for weeks." She laughed, and he captured the sound with another kiss, softer this time, more tender, but no less significant. When they separated, Austin caressed her face, his eyes serious. "Ollie, I know all this started in a crazy way, medical error, contract, pretending, but this..." He pressed her hand against his chest where his heart was beating hard. "This is real. You're real. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that making that decision to move in here was the best thing you could have done." The tears flowed freely now, but Ollie was smiling. "You're already proving it." They fell asleep like that, intertwined, complete, finally honest about what they felt. And outside, the city continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the small miracle happening in that room. A love born from chaos. A love that, against all odds, was the most right thing either of them had ever felt. The weeks following that night were like living in a dream. Austin and Ollie no longer hid what they felt, at least not from each other. The days were filled with shared laughter, deep conversations that stretched into the early morning hours, and constant touches that seemed necessary for breathing itself. He canceled meetings to have lunch with her. She anxiously waited for him to come home from work just so she could nestle in his arms. Dinners became sacred rituals where they exchanged stories, dreams, fears, And the nights were theirs completely. But not everything was perfect. Because despite all the love growing between them, Ollie carried a silent insecurity that gnawed from within, a small but insistent voice that whispered, "What if you're just the convenient accident? What if he wakes up one day and realizes this isn't real?" She tried to ignore it, tried to lose herself in the way he looked at her, how he touched her, how he whispered sweet words in her ear. But doubt was a stubborn shadow that refused to disappear completely. The bomb exploded on a Tuesday afternoon. Ollie was in the living room, leafing through a decorating magazine and thinking about how she could personalize the baby's room, when her phone vibrated with a notification. It was a message from an old colleague from the building where she worked as a cleaner, someone she hadn't talked to in months. "Ollie, did you see this? Isn't this the guy you're living with?" Below the message was a link. With her heart tight, Ollie clicked. It was an article from a celebrity and business magazine. The headline read, "Austin Blake and ex-model Isabel Fontaine together again. Sources say old flame may be rekindling." There were photos Austin at a charity event, an event Ollie didn't even know about, next to a stunning woman, tall, blonde, in a red dress that seemed to have been painted on her perfect body. Isabel Fontaine, international ex-model, heiress to a fashion fortune, and apparently Austin's ex-girlfriend. The photos showed them talking, smiling. In one, her hand was on his arm. Ollie's stomach turned. She read the article with trembling fingers. According to sources close to them, Austin and Isabel had had a serious relationship years ago and had recently been seen together at various events. Sources speculated about a possible reconciliation. There was no mention of Ollie, no mention of the pregnancy. It was as if she didn't exist. The front door opened and Austin came in, loosening his tie and smiling when he saw her. "Hey, love, you won't believe the day I had. The deal with the Japanese company finally." He stopped abruptly when he saw the expression on her face. "Ollie, what happened?" She stood up slowly, the phone still in her hand, and turned the screen toward him without saying a word. Austin took the device, his eyes quickly scanning the article, his jaw tightened, and he let out a heavy sigh. "Ollie, this isn't... Who is she?" Ollie's voice came out colder than she intended. "An ex-girlfriend from years ago. This doesn't mean anything. You went to an event with her and didn't tell me. I didn't go with her. We were just at the same event. She approached me. We talked out of politeness and that was it." Ollie crossed her arms, the vulnerability she always tried to hide, now exposed like an open wound. "And why didn't you tell me about the event? Why didn't you invite me?" Austin ran his hand over his face, clearly frustrated, but not with her, with himself. "Because it was a last-minute event, political, boring, the kind of thing I didn't want to drag you to. You were tired, remember? You'd spent the whole day with morning sickness." It was true, she remembered. But logic didn't calm the storm of insecurity roaring in her chest. "So you went alone and met your perfect ex-model. And now there are photos of you together, and speculation, and none of that matters because I love you." The words came out with an intensity that made Ollie stop mid-sentence. Her eyes widened. "What?" Austin took a step toward her, then another, until he was close enough to hold her shoulders firmly but gently. "I love you," he said each word slowly, with absolute emphasis. "Not Isabel. Not anyone else. You, Ollie. Only you." Tears began to fall from her eyes, but she shook her head, trying to pull away. "How can you be sure? We met under crazy circumstances. I got pregnant by accident. You took me in out of obligation. What if nothing?" He pulled her back, holding her face between his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Ollie, listen to what I'm saying. Yes, we started in a crazy way. Yes, the circumstances weren't conventional. But what I feel for you has nothing to do with obligation or accident. It has to do with the incredible woman you are, with the way you face the world with courage, even when you're afraid, with the way you make me laugh, with the way you make me want to be a better man." He pressed his forehead against hers, eyes closed, voice thick with emotion. "You're the only woman who's ever made me want to drop everything, work, stupid events, everything just to spend more time with you. I want you, Ollie. Not the mistake, not the situation. You." Ollie sobbed, her hands clutching his shirt. I'm so afraid this isn't real. That you'll wake up one day and realize you could have someone better, someone like her." Austin opened his eyes, pulling back just enough to look at her completely. "Ollie Sanders, you're going to listen to me now and listen well." His voice was firm, but loaded with love. "There is no one better. There's no one I want besides you. Isabel is part of the past, a past that means nothing to me now. You're my present, you and our baby, and God willing, you'll also be my future." He wiped her tears with his thumbs, his blue eyes shining with absolute sincerity. "I know you're afraid. I am too afraid of not being good enough for you. Afraid of messing everything up. But Ollie, the only thing that scares me more than that fear is the idea of losing you. So, please, believe me. Believe in what we have." Ollie closed her eyes, letting the words penetrate, dissolving the insecurities one layer at a time. When she opened them again, a decision had been made, the decision to trust, to take a risk, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be loved like this. "I love you, Austin," she said, her voice still trembling but firm. "I love you so much it hurts and it terrifies me." The smile that spread across his face was one of pure relief, of overflowing happiness. "Then, let's be afraid together, because I love you too so much I can't imagine my life without you." He kissed her, then deep, desperate, full of promises and silent declarations, and when they separated, both were smiling through tears. "No more secrets?" Ollie asked. "No more secrets. You'll know about every event, every meeting. Actually, you're coming with me always, even when I'm huge and awkward." He laughed, his hand sliding to her belly, caressing the curve with adoration. "Especially then. I want the whole world to see you. See us. See this family we're building." Ollie rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beating of his heart, the sound that had become her favorite place in the world. "Family," she repeated softly. "I like that. Me too. More than I imagined possible." They stayed like that, embraced in the middle of the room as the sun set outside, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. And in that moment, Ollie finally allowed the doubt to dissipate completely. Because the way Austin held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world said more than 1,000 words could express. She was loved. She was desired. She was chosen. And maybe, just maybe, that medical error that should have ruined their lives had actually been the best thing that ever happened to them. Because sometimes fate works in mysterious ways, and sometimes the best loves are born from the most unlikely beginnings. The months passed like leaves carried by the wind quickly, but filled with moments that seemed suspended in time. Ollie's belly grew, transforming into a pronounced curve that Austin couldn't stop touching. He talked to the baby every night, telling stories about the world waiting for him, making promises of protection and unconditional love. Ollie flourished not just physically, but in every way. The insecure woman who had entered that house months ago had transformed into someone confident, radiant, powerful. She attended events beside Austin, conversed with executives and investors with the same ease as she talked with the gardener. She'd learned to navigate that world without losing her essence, without forgetting where she came from. And Austin fell more in love every day with the way she laughed, with how she talked to her belly when she thought he wasn't listening, with the way her hand always sought his, as if she needed the constant connection. They had become inseparable not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The expected due date arrived in the early hours of a spring morning. Ollie woke up with a strong contraction that made her squeeze Austin's hand hard enough to leave marks. "Austin," she gasped, her eyes wide. "I think it's time." He sat up immediately, all sleepiness disappearing in a second. Okay, let's breathe. Remember what we learned in class." He was already moving, grabbing the bag they had prepared weeks before, calling the doctor, staying calm even with his heart racing. But when he looked at Ollie, saw the fear mixed with excitement in her eyes, all his composure almost crumbled. "Hey," he said softly, returning to the bed and holding her face. "You're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. I'm here. I won't leave your side for even a second." She nodded, squeezing his hand again when another contraction came. "I know. I trust you." And there was an absolute truth in those words that made Austin's heart tighten. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights, white corridors, and calm voices of nurses giving instructions. Ollie was settled into a delivery suite, courtesy of the best hospital in Chicago, where Austin had ensured she would have the best possible care. The hours dragged on, contractions that came in, increasingly intense waves, sweat on her forehead, tears of pain and exhaustion. But through it all, Austin was there holding her hand, wiping her face with a cold cloth, whispering words of encouragement. "You're the strongest woman I know. You can do this. We're almost there." "I can't take it anymore," Ollie cried at one point, completely exhausted. Austin pressed his forehead against hers, his eyes fixed on hers. "Yes, you can, because you're amazing, and our son is waiting to meet the incredible mother he has. Just a little more, love. Just a little more." And then, after what seemed like an eternity, the doctor said the magic words, "It's time to push." Ollie squeezed Austin's hand with all the strength she had left, and with one last monumental effort, she pushed. The sound that filled the room was the most beautiful either of them had ever heard, the strong, indignant cry of a newborn. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, lifting the baby so they could see. Austin felt tears stream freely down his face, tears of relief, of happiness, of overwhelming love. Ollie sobbed and laughed at the same time, her arms outstretched when they placed the baby on her chest, still covered in vernix, but absolutely perfect. The entire world seemed to stop. "Hi, my love," Ollie whispered, her fingers delicately tracing the tiny face. "Hi, baby. Mommy's here." Austin knelt beside the bed, unable to take his eyes off the scene before him. His son, his real son, with tiny fingers that already clutched Ollie's finger, with eyes trying to open, wanting to see the world, with a cry that was already the most important thing he'd ever heard. "He's perfect," Austin said, his voice choked. "He's ours," Ollie replied, looking at Austin with eyes full of tears and love. And in that look, Austin knew with absolute certainty what he needed to do. 2 days later, when Ollie was resting comfortably in the hospital suite, the baby sleeping peacefully in a bassinet beside the bed, Austin entered the room carrying something hidden behind his back. He looked nervous, something rare for someone who commanded boardrooms with powerful executives. "Ollie." She opened her eyes, smiling when she saw him. "Hi. What are you hiding?" Austin approached, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers, and took a deep breath. "Ollie, these last few months, you've transformed my life in ways I never imagined possible. You taught me what real love is, not convenient love, not obligatory love, but the kind of love that changes everything, that makes you want to be better, that makes every day worthwhile." Tears began to form in her eyes. "Austin, let me finish," he said softly, smiling. "When I found out about the pregnancy, I thought I was doing the right thing by bringing you to my house. I thought I was being responsible, fulfilling my duty. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being a responsibility and became my reason, my joy, my home." He moved then, getting off the bed and kneeling beside her. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Ollie's heart stopped. "Austin, what are you doing?" He opened the box, revealing a ring delicate, elegant, with a diamond that captured the light hypnotically. "Ollie Sanders, I'm not asking because you're carrying my child. I'm not asking because it makes sense logically. I'm asking because I'm crazy about you, because I can't imagine my life without you, because I want to wake up beside you every day for the rest of my life." Tears flowed freely now, but Ollie was smiling, that radiant smile that lit up her entire face. "Will you marry me, Ollie? Not out of obligation, not out of convenience, but because we love each other, because we're a family, and because I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that taking that risk, trusting me, was the best decision you ever made." Ollie couldn't speak. The words were stuck in her throat, suffocated by emotion, so she just nodded vigorously, desperately, until she finally managed to whisper, "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." The smile that exploded on Austin's face was one of pure happiness. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and then leaned in, capturing her lips in a deep kiss, full of promises and eternities. When they separated, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you so much," Ollie said, holding his face between her hands. "I love you more," he replied, pressing another soft kiss to her lips. A soft cry came from the bassinet, and both turned to look. The baby was waking up, his little eyes blinking, his face contorting in an expression that clearly said, "I need attention now." Austin stood up, picking up his son with a gentleness that always surprised Ollie. He cradled him against his chest, whispering soft words. "Hi there, little one. Guess what?" Mommy said yes. "We're going to be a real family now." Ollie watched the two of them, the man she loved holding their son, and felt her heart overflow. "What are we going to call him?" she asked softly. Austin looked at her, his eyes shining. "How about Ethan? It means strong, firm like you. Like us." Ollie smiled. "Ethan Blake. I love it." 3 months later, they married in an intimate ceremony in the garden of the house that was now truly theirs, only close family and dear friends. Margaret cried through the entire event. Richard shook Austin's hand with paternal pride. And when Austin and Ollie exchanged vows, words written by themselves, full of references to the impossible journey they'd traveled, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. "I promise to love you on the easy days and the hard ones," Austin said, holding her hands. "I promise to be your safe harbor, your partner, your best friend. I promise to honor the accident that brought us together, because that accident gave me everything I always wanted, but never knew I needed." Ollie smiled through her tears. "I promise to trust you, even when fear tries to convince me otherwise. I promise to build this life with you day by day. I promise to love you and our son with every piece of my being, and I promise never to forget that the best gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected situations." When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Austin pulled Ollie close, kissing her deeply as everyone applauded and celebrated. The final scene shows the three of them months later on a lazy Sunday. The house had been transformed. Ethan's room was decorated with clouds painted on the ceiling and stuffed animals on every surface. There were toys scattered around the living room, evidence of a life lived, not just inhabited. Ollie was sitting on the sofa, Ethan sleeping peacefully in her lap. Austin came from behind, leaning down to kiss her forehead and then the top of their son's head. "Is he sleeping?" he whispered. "Just fell asleep." Austin walked around the sofa, sitting beside her, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her close. Ollie rested her head on his shoulder, eyes closed in pure contentment. "Are you happy?" Austin asked softly. She opened her eyes, turning her face to look at him. And what he saw there, love, peace, gratitude, answered, before she even spoke. "More than I ever imagined possible." He touched her face tenderly, tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb. "Me too. You and Ethan, you're everything." They kissed, then soft, slow, full of everything they'd built together. When they separated, Ollie looked at the sleeping baby, then at the ring on her finger, then at the man beside her. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "All of this started with a mistake. An absurd medical error that should never have happened." Austin smiled, kissing her temple. "Yeah, but you know what I learned?" "What?" "That destiny doesn't make mistakes when it comes to true love. It just works in mysterious ways." Ollie laughed softly, pressing closer against him. "Mysterious, that's one word for it. But true." And there, in that house that had become a home, with a baby who was the physical symbol of their love, and with hearts finally complete, Austin and Ollie knew an absolute truth. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unlikely mistakes. And sometimes the love that didn't make sense on paper is exactly the kind of love that makes all the sense in the heart. And so, what began as an impossible mistake transformed into the truest love story. Ollie learned